All right, so I'm just going to do a basic handle and what's that? Okay, I can get by without it. I'm going to put a heavier, basically a brass coupling, and then we're going to drill and tap to be able to slide a tool in and making one that you can actually take in and out. So here we go. Okay, so we're just trying to fit the bushing to this. So there's threads inside here, so we're got to get it the right size so she'll thread on. Almost there. Now threads on. A little too much. Guess I should have learned how to put threads on wood. Okay. Yep.
Is there a reason that you didn't drill the hole for the tool first?
Yeah, I was gonna drill it on here by hand.
And is the brass piece, is that a purchased piece or?
Yep. Yeah, that was just a 3/4 inch coupling, brass coupling. Pipe.
Or something?
Yep. What's that?
The shape, the size of the handle?
Whatever feels good.
You got a flare on the end that's hand or just what you like.
Yeah.
Your thoughts about the ratio between the ferrule and the wood?
Well, this one, I wanted something heavier because I was going to drill and tap into here for a screw. And so it just, copper tubing didn't look like enough.
What about the width of the wood just towards the handle past the ferrule? Right where your index finger is.
Well, when you look at, assorted tools, they're all about, something that feels good. So you just want to, I got this driven up tight up against the shoulder. And so then we're going to drill in. Actually, I'm going to leave this. I'm going to drill through here, but this will get cut off because it was a little bit undersized. And then I'll probably drill it in a little bit deeper. Let's see, we got enough room here. No. Uh-oh. What's that? Oh, forgot about that.
On the back.
Backside. That will help. So we got our center point from the tailstock. let me go cut this off. Okay. Well, my hole ended up a bit off center, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe pre-drilling would have been a better idea, but I can show you a little drilling and tapping here, and then we can move on. So, you know, it's you know, you can shape them the way you like them. But this should be able to slide your tool in, lock it down, do whatever, change them.
I was just wondering if the different size handles for different tools.
Yeah, you just, you know, change the length.
Like hollowing, you want a longer handle, don't you?
Yeah, that'd probably help. Get it under there. So it's got to throw all of you in just instead of just your arm. All right, let me just kind of run through drilling and tapping a little bit. So if you there, drilling in the soft metals, fluid isn't necessarily needed. When you're drilling in steel, you should have something. Same with tapping. So this is a 1/4-20, and oh, okay. Cameras. Okay, so we got our hole, and I mean, there's not very much metal here, more than a little piece of copper pipe. So threads are going in the wood also. But this, you know, when you're tapping deeper metal, you'd be going back to break the chip off. Go forward some more, break the chip off. So then you take a 1/4-inch thumb screw, or maybe one of those with the plastic wing on the top. And so you would put in your tool, and then I like to have them on top, and you can lock it down so you know where up is if you got a curved tool, a straight tool, whatever, and lock it down. You could also, if you find it, you can't get it tight enough and they want to twist, is go ahead and file a flat in line with your tool, and then the flat lines up with your bolt. Lock it down, and you're all set to go. And stuff like brass, I mean, if you've got a carbide tool or this high-speed steel, I also have got some carbide tools at home. You can cut on this brass and copper and trim it up and clean it up, whatever you want. Not that hard. You just, a little bit at a time. Take your time, and it will cut. So that's about all I got.
Okay, my approach to dealing with tool handles has changed a lot over the last couple of years. I used to turn an individual handle for every tool and glue it in. And that was when I was using cheap tools. But when I started buying, the better quality tools, these are Doug Thompson's tools, I decided that I wanted to have a set of handles that I'd be able to use with all the tools that I was going to purchase from him. So I searched around the internet, and I found a guy online on YouTube named Steve Krummenacker, I think is how he pronounces it, that had come up with a way to use ordinary plumbing supplies that you can pick up at the plumbing department at Fleet Farm and Ace Hardware and places like that to make a set of collets that you could use with basically any tool that you want. And this is really a simple approach to this. What it is, it's a compression nut with an adapter that he uses, that's epoxied into the handle. And the compression nut is cut on one side. I don't know if you can see this or not. I'll try to hold it still here. But it's cut open on one side so that when it compresses, when you tighten it down, it tightens around the tool, gives you a nice firm purchase on it, and yet when you release the nut, it releases it enough so you can get the tool out. Word of warning, if you make one of these yourself, don't forget to cut the slot in the compression nut, because otherwise you'll be cutting your tool handle apart to get your tool out of there, because these things do actually hold pretty well. I found a way to help put this together and pass it around. And it may seem a little bit odd to have a wrench like this, but you have to have some kind of a tool to tighten them anyway. So the other thing you'll notice about my tool handles, I'm starting to develop a little bit of arthritis. Anybody else have that problem here? No, I didn't think so. So I actually turn them off center. These are triangle shaped, and I feel it gives me a little bit better grip on it. I have a little bit, it's a little more comfortable to hold on to. And this end is round, this end is triangle shaped. I'll pass that one around. And one without the tool in it, that's a 1/2 inch. You do need to do a separate one for each size tool you're going to use. I use 3/8, 1/2 inch, and 5/8 inch. So that's what I've turned so far. There may be other ways to do like 1/4 inch and 3/4 inch. I just haven't looked for the plumbing supplies for them yet. There's my 3/8 inch. Now the parts for these are parts that you can very easily find at places like in the plumbing department at Fleet Farm, which is where this came from. Ace Hardware also has them. I ran into a problem when I tried to use the same type of a part from Menards. The ones that I found at Menards have what they call a lead-free ferrule or lead-free compression ring inside, and they're a little bit different construction, and I could not make them work. But these work very well. This is 1/2 inch by 3/8 inch FIP. That's a female iron pipe adapter with a 1.5 inch nipple that goes into it. The nipple actually gives you support down inside the tool handle. So I'll pass these around. I do need these back, by the way, because I got another tool handle to make out of them. When do you need them back? Very soon, actually. The tools would be nice to get back too. This is one that is in progress. This is for a 1/2 inch, and again, I'm not sure how well you can see this, but what I have done here is the adapter is got flats on it, so you can tighten it down. I turn that off. In other words, this is chucked up in a chuck on my lathe, and it is brass, so as Mark said, you can turn it down with the carbide tool or with high-speed steel. I turn it down so that it'll fit inside a hole I'm going to bore in the tool handle, and then I cut some grooves in it to give the epoxy something to grab onto. And this one is also ready to go, so I've cut the slot in it. And I cut the slot with a Dremel tool, just a cut-off wheel and a Dremel tool. This stuff is pretty soft, so you go through it just like that. And this is a handle that I was going to prepare for today. What I do is I do the fitting first. So I get the fitting to a size that I can deal with. This one has had the flats ground off and has already got the grooves cut in it. And then I bore a hole in the tool handle. And I do it a little bit differently than Mark showed you. What I do is this end has a tenon on it. And the reason that I leave the tenon on it, I drill this first. This is actually rounded between centers. And then I put a tenon on one end. And then I start the shaping on it and drill the hole. I actually use the hole to center against a 60-degree cone center. That way I know that I'm going to be running concentric all the time. And the other reason for leaving the tenon on is when I get this thing inserted and the epoxy is dry tomorrow, there's always some epoxy that accumulates inside the shaft. So I want to be able to put this back on the lathe and run the drill bit back down through it again. The other thing that I discovered is that there is a shoulder inside this adapter, and the shoulder doesn't have quite enough clearance to allow the tool to pass completely through. So what I do is put it back on the lathe, get it centered up, and run the drill bit back down through it again to clear it out. And that also clears out any epoxy buildup or anything like that. And so far with every one of them that I've done, I've had a perfect fit. The tenon is where I also put the off-center marks. This actually has 4 centers. So I've got the true center, and then I number the other centers so that I'm turning the tool handle off-center. That's how I get the triangle shape. And only on one end, this end runs concentric. And to get the shape that I get, I take a parting tool and part into the depth of where I think I want this transition to be. And when I'm turning the tool handle down to the triangle shape, I turn down to that part and leave the part in place so I can see it, and then sand it off the last minute, before I take it off the lathe. And it gives me a shape that I'm pretty comfortable with. I'm pretty happy with it, and it's actually a pretty pleasing shape too. We'll mix up some epoxy here, and just any old 2-part epoxy will work. This is Balin's. You gotta wonder what the culver spoon is for, huh? Show you in a minute. Yeah, don't go cheap on the epoxy. Use plenty. It's not that expensive. A little stir stick action here. Okay, now you're probably looking at this saying, is he really mixing up enough epoxy? Because that's, that hole is 1.5 inches deep that I bore into the end of the tool. And it doesn't look like I've got enough epoxy here to coat that adequately. Well, there's a trick that you can use that actually will extend the epoxy. And frankly, I owe this to a very good friend of mine. A guy sitting back there in a blue shirt and a turning club cap that found this at a garage sale. Remember? I asked Al one day if he had heard of any place that sold this high density adhesive filler for epoxy. No, he hadn't, but then a couple of weeks later he walks up and hands me a bag with this in it. He found it at a garage sale. Now the stuff is available. You can order it either online, and I believe places that deal with marine repair and marine equipment will be able to get this, because this is quite commonly used in boat repairs. Is that what it was? Was there an auction? Yeah. Well, by the way, this can sells for about $10. And you can still get it today, same quantity, same can. It just doesn't have all the character to it. What this stuff does is it extends the volume of the epoxy, and when it dries, it's hard as a rock. So it actually gets you, a nice epoxy that is going to fill the gaps that you have. It extends your epoxy a little bit, and it's a nice solid compound. So I'm only going to put in a little bit less than a teaspoon here. And mix this stuff up so that it's about the consistency of peanut butter, which I should be able to get out of this. You give it a good mix. You see what's happening with it here? I don't know if the camera's picking this up or not, but it's getting the consistency of, well, I don't want to be disgusting about it, but it's a consistency that we all know about. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to coat the inside of the handle first. Look at that. And by the way, it doesn't smell good. And we'll do a little bit on the adapter. Feels like the epoxy is starting to set up a little bit, so I better hustle here. And you want to be careful not to get any on the threads of your nut, because like I say, this stuff dries hard as a rock. Yeah, don't ask me how I know that. Let's wipe off a little bit of the excess here. I used a just an ordinary piece of copper pipe for a ferrule on this. I like the 3/8 that I passed around because that's actually a brass nut that I turned down. It's got a little bit nicer appearance to it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I like it a lot better than the copper, but it just happens that I've got a bunch of the copper in the shop someplace, so that's what I wind up using. And pardon? Oh yeah, yeah. Now, fair warning, the Fleet Farm store that you go to may not have the stuff. But I found that if I went to the Bellevue store first, and they had some of it. And so I wound up going to the Fleet Farm out on the west side, the Howard Fleet Farm. And they had everything. And I was shopping for something else, and I went to Kemp's, Ace Hardware in Howard. They had it. But, like I say, the one area that, the one problem that I had was I first tried to use the stuff from Menards, because everybody knows I'm kind of a Menards guy anyway. And the stuff from Menards, I could not get them to work, and couldn't separate the compression ring inside from the nut. They're somehow molded together, and when I tried to separate them, I did too much damage to it. I couldn't get it to work. But these are standard adapters that, like I say, if you want to order them, you can order them online. And I don't think I did enough for everybody, but I did do some, little handouts here. For a 1/2-inch tool shaft, 1/2-inch compression by 3/8-inch FIP adapter, and a pipe nipple 3/8 by 1.5. 3/8-inch tool shaft, 3/8 compression by a 1/4-inch FIP adapter. The pipe nipple on that one's 1/4 by 1.5. And for a 5/8-inch tool shaft, 5/8-inch compression by 1/2-inch FIP adapter, and the nipple on that one is 1/2-inch by 1.5. I think instead of passing these around, I'll lay them on the end of the counter here, so if you want one, pick it up. I will also tell you that sometime today or tomorrow, our club Facebook page will have an article that I did on how to do this posted, so you'll be able to go to the Facebook page, go to files, and it'll be something obvious like, collet adapter or something like that. I don't know what I called the file on it, but you'll be able to download that. And that has photographs of the components and a complete description on how to put this together. Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir. Yeah, and the hole in this, I only drilled the hole about 1.5 inches deep, which doesn't sound like it's deep enough, except you got to remember, that's 1.5 inches from here down. From here up, you're still adding, quite a bit of hardware. So the standard, and I didn't realize this, but there is a standard with the tool manufacturers that they pretty much adhere to. The ones that sell unhandled tools, the shafts on the tools are actually 15 thousandths oversized. So this 1/2-inch spindle gouge is actually 15 thousandths oversized, but what they do is at 2 inches up from the end of the tool, from the bottom end of the tool, this is exactly a 1/2 inch. 500 thousandths. That gives you a little shoulder here. So no matter how deep the hole is here, it's only going to go into the shoulder anyway. And I've been using, this one I did in, what was it, February, Dick? Yeah. This one I did in February. The earlier one, the smaller one that's going around, I did it last year. Now, I've never had any kind of an issue yet with vibration or any concern about it at all. to me, this is as solid as any other collet that I've seen. I'm sure that the ones that you pay significant money for are probably better made, and there may be some advantages to them. But for a guy that's just looking for a way to be able to accomplish something on a budget, this is actually a pretty cheap way to go. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's why you put the ferrule on too. The ferrule actually is pretty tight. You notice how when Mark was putting his ferrule on, how he really had to twist it on. I had to hammer these things on too. They're not loose, and they're friction fit. And before I put them on, I actually do dab a little bit of epoxy on one side just to hold them, and then pound them down, so they're not coming off.
You don't pin them? You don't pin it?
No.
Okay.
No. You could, but you got to remember you've got the brass hardware inside here. So if you try to pin it, you're gonna be dealing with a pretty short pin, and you also would run the risk, I would think, of drilling into the nipple inside. I don't know if it would make a difference or not. And as I think I mentioned a little while ago, that I do re-drill these. Once the epoxy is dry, run the drill bit down inside them, just to clear out any epoxy that accumulates, because it looks like I did get some inside there. Yeah, there is. And, I do that to, clear that out, take care of that collar. And I don't know, so far I haven't had any concern with one. This is getting warm too. It's interesting how the epoxy heats up like that. Any other questions? Oh, how big a piece of wood do I use? Oh, I start out with a 2x2 billet and take it down to a size that's comfortable. I've never really measured these, to be honest with you. I don't know what they are. But I take it down enough to get this to round. And you like that? Yeah, sure. Yeah, with me. He said it's going home. But it really is a matter of personal preference. This one is short. First of all, I designed it to use with a smaller tool. I don't need a long tool handle with the 3/8 bowl gouge that I have and the 3/8 spindle gouge. And the rest of the story on this one is that when I was turning it, I also screwed it up and had to start over again. That's why it's short. Nobody's ever made a mistake, right? Okay. But the size of the billet that you start with, it's purely up to you. 1/4 inch. Yeah, you want to be careful about that. Good question about the offset that I use on getting the triangular shaped handle. You don't want to go too radical. Start from your center point. I measure 120-degree angles out each way. And then I use 1/4 inch. You may even want to start less than that, because otherwise, you're taking off way too much material at the butt end of your handle. Because if this would have been done at 3/8 or 1/2 inch, it would have gotten the diameter of the handle down way too small here. And if you're going to taper it, you're going to be way too small here too. So I felt like, for me, 1/4 inch is more than enough. And, I do stop quite a bit to measure, to make sure that I'm not taking off too much material, and that I'm getting a nice, relatively straight cut on them. The other thing that I do with these, when I've got them down to shape, it's real easy to sand this stuff, because you're sanding with the grain. I start out with an 80 grit sandpaper, and fair this end as close as I can get it, and it produces a pretty nice finish. Yeah, I like the way it feels in the hand. Anybody else?
How do you orient, which way do you
What I do is grab the handle where I'm, feel comfortable with it, insert the tool, turn the tool to where I think it matches, and then just give the nut a twist. And that, ordinarily it'll twist it enough to hold it in place that you can take the wrench and tighten it down. I don't have a specific orientation for them. It probably always is about the same, but it's always about, it's never precise. I just do it until it feels good, until I get to a position that I want. And the nice thing about it too is that, if I want to change it, it's real easy. Just, loosen the nut, turn it to a little bit different angle, and then twist it back down again. One of the other things that I do have some tool handles that I've got some metal handles that I use for my hollowing tools. And one of the objections I've had, with all due respect to people that are doing metal handles, that I don't like about them, I don't like the fact that they ding up the shaft of the tool. Now with these Thompson tools, these are what, M42 I think is what he's using. They're a harder steel to begin with, but on some of my, like my hollowing tools, I've got a set of John Jordan hollowing tools, and I was using the handles that Jordan provided with them, and to tighten them down so that you've got a good firm grasp on them, I was dinging up the shaft on the tool. And I suppose you could say, well, there's an advantage to that in that, if you get it lined up correctly, the screw is going to settle back in the same place. But the problem that I had with them is that I had to file the damn things down a couple of times because I couldn't get the tool all the way into the handle because of the disruption that the set screw caused. There's no possibility of anything like that happening with this stuff.